Hey everyone, welcome to the Midpoint Review. I'm your host, AJ Tabando, and we got a great show for you today. I'm joined by my friend, Rodrigo Borges, who, as you will hear in the intro, has done like a dozen different jobs in a ton of different fields. He's here today to reflect on two specific experiences that have shaped this moment in time for him. Moving to Canada from Brazil in 2021, and going back to school a few years later to get his MBA. He'll talk a little bit about how each of those experiences was a life review unto itself, on top of the whole midlife review thing. It's a really beautiful conversation about finding joy in everything, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. But before we get started, a shout out to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. If you're a coffee drinker like me, you know how important that first cup is in the morning, and that the only thing worse than no cup of coffee in the morning is a bad cup of coffee. Habit Coffee Club protects you from ever having to deal with a bad cup of coffee again. Go to www.habitcoffeeclub.com to order a bag or sign up for a subscription and use the promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off. That's www.habitcoffeeclub.com and start enjoying their rich, full-bodied roast today. All right, let's start the show. Okay, welcome everyone to the Midpoint Review. I'm super excited for today's guest, Rodrigo Borges. Rodrigo describes himself as someone who says yes more than no. That's mostly what turned his career into a patchwork quilt. And patchwork quilt indeed. From the list I have, we have copywriter, creative director, social media, marketing, project and operations manager, salesman, and startup founder. This has happened in a bunch of different markets, such as advertising, nonprofit, financial services, and tech. So Rodrigo has been around and seen some stuff, and we're going to hear about it today. And in 2021, he landed in Toronto, coming from Brazil for the current chapter of his life, which really brings him to the podcast today, because the midlife experience is a ride unto itself. But when you layer on the experience of uprooting your life and immigrating to a new country at the same time, it becomes a whole other ride. So Rodrigo, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We're super excited to have you here, and I gave you quite an intro, but for those who might not know you, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so besides all of you already described, I think I could say, besides all of that, I've done some personal projects throughout my life. I've done some podcasting when it wasn't that trendy, and I've written some children books that I never released, but they are like in digital form for me and my family. I just have this feeling that I should try things. And I keep doing that. Whether I have the opportunity or I create the opportunity, normally I say, yes, let's do it. And well, that's me.
And what tells you when you should try new things? Like, those are all very interesting kind of creative projects. What is it that makes you say, you know what, today I'm going to try writing a children's book?
It's hard to say, to specify it. It's more of a feeling. Maybe it's boredom. Maybe it's this feeling that I could be doing something better than I'm doing, or something more fulfilling. And it depends, right? Because we do what we can, basically. And sometimes you need more money. Sometimes you need more structure. And other times you have the money and you don't have the fun. And I think I've been trying to balance that since I started working. And probably that's what brought me here with my family to Toronto. It was back then in 2018 when we decided to move, and then I went through the process, and it takes time. Everything was right. Everything was in place. And then me and my wife, we thought, well, is this it? Are we done? Are we going to stay here and, I don't know, buy a house and live in this house for 20 years or 30 or 40 years? And then our children will grow up, and where's the fun and where's the adventure? So I think it's more of a feeling that I cannot control, but I have to adapt to the situation that I'm living. Like, if things are right, everything's right, maybe I could put something like a little more, I could add some adventure.
Yeah.
If I'm in the adventure, like, maybe I should add some
Stability.
structure, some stability, so that, well, I have my feet on something.
Yeah. That's so interesting. The desire for finding those new adventures and how the definition of adventure can evolve over time, right? That, when we're younger, doing big crazy moves, adventure, travel, moving, all these things, uprooting your whole life. Like that's how you define adventure. And then sometimes as we get older, it just means trying something you haven't done before to see if you can do it, right? And there's adventure even though your life, the big chunks of your life, the main pillars might not be changing or moving, it's still an adventure. Like it's kind of like an internal adventure, you know? What am I capable of? And let's keep expanding that, right?
I think for me, trying a new flavor of ice cream is a type of fun adventure.
I love that.
And even waiting for something to come by mail. Like I like to track the process.
Oh, no, like you're
So
like on like
I
the
love
app,
tracking the process.
UPS app, watching the adventure that is your
Yes,
package
sometimes
in
I
the
feel that I'm
Mississauga
more
mail delivery warehouse.
fulfilled through the process than by getting the thing, because when I get it, it's there.
I love that. Oh my God. Okay, so let's take a moment to just talk about finding joy in the little things because that is though like what a joyful experience. If you can find joy in watching the postal service try to get something to you, like I think your life, you know, you've got some good foundational kind of things in your life that will set you up for success no matter what kind of adversity you experience. So how did you get like this? How did you become, have you always been someone who finds joy in all these like little things, or is that something that like you kind of nurtured over time throughout your life?
I think, I don't know, maybe as I got more conscious of who I am,
Yeah.
uh, I started realizing that more, but it seems that it's something that I've done throughout my life, even pissed off as my wife at the same time, because I'm in this constant balancing through, is my life good enough? I'm constantly questioning myself about that, and I cannot bear the feeling of finding out that it isn't. So there's an element of feeling, and there's an element of effort not to feel unfulfilled. Then these things, the small things, they help with the fulfillment. And of course, there are big things too, and very obvious things like my kids and my family and being healthy, things like that. But the small things, they help. Even like trying a new beer, a new flavor, trying a new flavor of ice cream, or waiting for, I don't know, something that I bought online to come up, or even a podcast episode or new music. I'm always, well, you know that, like I'm always listening to new music. So these, and I could sum everything up as experiences, like being conscious that you are having those experiences and they are fulfilling at some extent, even if it's like trying a bad flavor of ice cream. Even that, like I didn't like this,
Yeah, but
but
it's
now
the
I know.
experience. Yeah, it's the experience of finding out. Yeah, that's so lovely. And such a great way to such a great mindset to bring to every aspect of life. So, so tell us a little bit about the experience that you had of the big adventure in 2018, beginning in 2018 and then leading you to make a move in 2021, and yeah, how that's unfolded for you and how that has maybe intersected with other major moments in your life.
There's a good passage of a movie that always comes to my mind when I think about these moments where you are about to go into the adventure. This is a documentary by Clint Eastwood. There's a box of documentaries about blues, and he directs one, a DVD box that I watched, I don't know, like 2000 and something back, where a guy that used to play on the street was recognized by like a producer, and this producer paid him a ticket, like a train ticket, to go to Chicago to record his first song ever. And then the documentary talks a little bit about his travel in the train. Like it was his first time on a train, first time recording something professionally. And I always comes to my mind the feeling of that guy, like all of his life, future life, and even maybe past life, going through his eyes, because there's something about to happen that, of course, he thinks it would be very good, but it's something new. So back then, the feeling of moving to a new country just energized me in a way that everything becomes an element of the journey. So even like in the bad things, they will become past, right? And the good things you expect to take them to the future with you, right? And then reality comes. So when we land and you try to be prepared, you have some amount of money, you have, well, I came with a job, so that makes things easier, totally. My wife came without one, but she got a job pretty quickly considering the overall experience of the immigrant. But then I started working remotely 100% because it's
Right.
part of the deal that I struck with my company. And then reality comes and you see yourself, you notice what you don't have anymore. Your friends, your family, even your coworkers, the interactions that you have. And in this context of a review, and in my case, it really was a midpoint review, like the biggest one of my life. Then you start noticing the constraints and what you start missing. That brought me to my executive MBA, like to interact with people, to have more of a Canadian experience that I did, an expression that I didn't even know existed, but throughout like interacting with other people from different countries, I realized that it is a thing and I acknowledge it and I understand it, although it's kind of like it's negative for me and my peers.
It's like, as someone who's worked in a lot of employment fields, and it's a pretty made up concept, let's be honest.
No, I would challenge that because
Yeah.
I understand the comfort for a company that is having someone that is immersed in the culture for so much time, forever, right? Since they are there. And I understand there's a lot of value in the diversity and different. I'm like that, right? I know, but I know that they don't know
Mm,
normally.
right.
So I understand the necessity to prove myself in a way, even if it is like by my accent, overcoming that barrier. That's a very natural barrier. So I understand that's not, it shouldn't be like that, but it is.
Sure. Fair enough. And so you went into the MBA, which you've described as sort of a third review layered on top of, this moment in your life. You go there to reconnect. I mean, in hindsight, 2021 is a really challenging time to be moving to a new place, not just for all the challenges that you described. Inevitably, that anyone new to a new place experiences of isolation and culture shock or whatever that might be. But then layer on, in Toronto, we were still very much in lockdown mode around COVID. And, maybe towards the end of that year, I don't even think towards the end of the year we were fully reopened. So I mean, it was, yeah. So talk a little bit about that, and then I guess deciding to go into the MBA program as a vehicle to break out of some of that.
I think in the end, it will be a very good story. It is already a very good story, like how crazy we were. But it's funny because in 2008, when there's the financial crisis hit, I also moved. Like I was living in São Paulo. It's like the biggest city in Brazil. And I was working there as a copywriter. And my now wife, we started dating there. And she got a job offer in a different city. Then I left my job and went with her to freelance as a copywriter in this different city. And all my friends, they were like, what are you doing? Like, this is crazy. This is a financial crisis. And then it becomes like, it's a big learning for me to understand that there's no right time. There's just, you just go, right? And of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't plan or try to calculate the variables, but then there's you, and there's that feeling that if you don't do this now, you might never do it. And I think that came like the MBA was the same thing. Like I was in Toronto just meeting. I lived in a condo when we arrived, and there was like a co-working space, and I would meet the same guys all the day, like every day. We never speak with like everybody in their own tables. And one day I said, hey, guys, we're here every day. What's your name?
Yeah.
What's your name? And then that, like these moments, they are like special, but without the interaction, I miss so much the interaction with real humans. And then again, it was like, okay, let's do this. Let me interact with these people. And it was very enriching, like more, I could say now, like more than the knowledge that I got throughout the program, because that's knowledge that I could get elsewhere. But the connections, the people that I started interacting, the different cultures, like people from Ukraine, China, and Philippines, so many different places, even Brazilians, we were four there, Chile, Colombia. So it was very, it was fun. It was fun. Of course, it was like writing too, like very stressful and everything. As I think it's part of the structure. I think they even make it more stressful than we need because it's part of the, like, you're paying for that, right?
Yeah, it's the
You're paying for
culture.
the stress. But yeah, so I went through it as also like a process of challenging myself, but realizing that there's a benefit, like pretty clear in this process of challenging yourself. So and it's pretty clear for me. That's the way to grow. You grow by accepting these challenges, which are opportunities in disguise.
Absolutely. I think too, going back to everything you were saying at the beginning around finding joy in the process and the little things. It's going through these challenging, when you know how to do that and you can put yourself in the mindset of enjoying the journey and the ride. And kind of finding the beauty even in the the low points, those challenges, like you can see that in these other experiences that you have around these going to school and experiencing the opportunity to work really hard, which is hard, it's in the name, but it pushes you to grow, right? And it pushes you to expand what you're capable of. In some ways, so as you were talking about travel and finding the joy in the process of it, I was thinking back to a trip my husband and I took before we were married. It was the end of our 20s, so I guess this was like my 1/4 point review. I was coming out of politics and had a break in my career that I could take advantage of, and he took a leave of absence, and we decided to spend a couple of months traveling around the world. It was a lot of fun, and it was an incredible experience. But so much of that doing it was not because going like on safari was on my bucket list or anything like that. It was like, I want to see what we're capable of, like, can we actually rise to this challenge of doing something big and like changing the definition of what our lives are like? Because we were also at a point where it was very, not is this it, but it was like we were starting to settle down and we were in a place where you could still kind of blow things up a little and have those big adventures. And so everything you're talking about really resonates with my own experience, and I'm sure so many of the listeners' experiences of like pushing yourselves into these environments and realizing, coming out of them suddenly aware of not just how much you've grown, but how much you can do and how much is inside of you to do. And I think that's a really powerful thing to acknowledge, that kind of experience, because as we get older, it can be so easy to just stay really comfortable, right? Because growth is an inherently uncomfortable process. It can be really attractive to stop being uncomfortable at a certain point, but that's kind of when you stop growing.
Yeah, I agree.
So, all right, so let's change gears just a little bit and talk about what all these midpoints kind of mean to you, and how you feel like this moment is unfolding for you and how you see yourself kind of moving through it and onto the other side. Do you feel, actually, maybe I'll reframe that a little bit. Do you feel like you're on the other side of some of these things because you're done your MBA? You've been here now for 4 years, and kind of settled in and met me and other friends. So you have people, you have community. So that's great. And so, yeah, do you still feel like you're kind of right in the midpoint of something? Or do you feel like you are, coming towards the exit into a new stage of something?
I think I don't feel settled yet, and I don't know if I ever will. And like here in Toronto, outside of my country, I don't know. And that's something I'm consciously thinking about that. Like figuring out a state where maybe I will feel comfortable, or if I should even. And there's a balance between not wanting to settle down versus needing to, because now we have 2 kids and like we need structure. But I don't know. My father is just like that. Like it's funny because I think like I'm exactly like my father in a different time frame and generation. So he wasn't, I think, allowed to take this much chance as I'm taking, to take this many options. And I feel that because he used to talk with me about that. He was a journalist throughout his life, and he worked in the same company, one of the biggest networks of Brazil, for I don't know, maybe 25 to almost 30 years in the same company. I can never imagine myself doing that. But he released a small book throughout the process. We moved a lot. Like I think I even I had, I don't know, maybe 10 homes, different homes in 5 different cities when I was like, I was 14 and was already moving a lot. And after that, I did that too. Like I lived in like with my wife in uh, uh, that new city, Porto Alegre, before São Paulo. Then we moved to Rio. Then we moved back to Brasilia, where I graduated, and now Toronto. So there's this element of constant change or search for adventure. It's part of me. Scope, the size of the adventure certainly will be adjusted by now and on, but it's always there. So now I have this startup that we're trying to make it work. And I think there's an element of that adventure in it. And
Mm.
it's a hustle, as you know. I have my day job and then the startup, and it's hard to balance them. And there's the family, but again, I'm this constant feeling of, okay, this is too much. I should stop with, I don't know, with one of them. And the other side is, if I stop, I'll get bored
Mhm.
and I'll have to look for something else to do because I'm always doing so. I don't know, until something better does not come up or I don't feel burned out,
Mm.
I'll keep doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I this review is an ongoing review.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it, that this is sort of, this isn't so much a moment as it is a way of life, perhaps, for how you approach things and how you think about. You seem like someone who's always sort of thinking and analyzing and reflecting on your life. And does that also come sort of naturally from, if your dad was a journalist, he was probably pretty reflective on things as well.
Yeah, and I think that this is a good element of that because my father, he always talked with me. Well, now we talk through FaceTime, WhatsApp, but he relied on me for decisions, for his decisions and family decisions since we were very young. I have a twin brother, right? So both of us, like he would take us for these walks through like to the neighborhood, and clearly these were very good moments for him. They were for us too, but we were kids, right? Now
Sure.
I can value that even more. But I felt very valued
Mm.
whenever when I was 16, what he should do. What do you think that we should do now? Like, should I don't know, leave my job, go do something else, or even our life's decisions as a family? So I think that brought me to this mindset where things are possible if you are aligned with yourself and with your environment. That's basically like the basic environment is your family, right? So I feel whenever I think of moving or doing something different, I feel somewhat protected by my family, and it includes my wife. Still not yet my kids, although I try to emulate something that my father used to do with me, with my 5-year-old son now. I try to include him in a way. It's very different. I don't remember how my father used to do that when I was 5. But that element of integration
Mm.
protects me in a way.
What do you mean by protect?
Protects is like I'm safe if what I'm doing makes sense and is aligned with the environment I'm in. So if my
Mm.
family is good with it, and I can even extend that to my coworkers in my company. Like, I'm never afraid of a decision when it's made together. Like,
Hmm.
we're doing this, everybody agrees, or most people agree,
Mhm.
and even the ones
Yeah.
who don't agree, like they'll jump in.
Yeah.
Then we're good. Like, then it doesn't matter what happens, because if something goes wrong, we can correct this as a group and we can make it work. So I feel that maybe that's the courage, where I get my courage from, is from these connections that show that I'm not alone. And if something goes wrong, I have my backup.
There's so much there that's so interesting to think about. Just even that last comment about, finding courage, in another way to put it, like finding courage through having your community, right? Which is what your family and if you expand that into coworkers and other folks really could be considered, and how um oof, now I'm thinking about so much, like how important community is to helping people feel empowered to do big things. And I just posted an episode today that was a previous interview, and we talked a little bit about community and the loss of community that so many of us feel, and now I'm just spinning a little bit thinking about how that could, connect to feelings of like disempowerment or fear, or, feeling stuck and not knowing how to make big bets or move forward because, you don't have that feeling of connection. I think the other thing that came up when I was listening to you talk about that is how it's really beautiful to think about the idea of doing disruptive things together. When you hear about like a previous midlife crisis, the like cartoon version of, previous generations buying a car, or having an affair, or like doing, whatever, it always is couched in this idea of like feeling stuck, which is a shared feeling, I think, for so many of us in a different way. But then just like needing to take this very individualistic approach to blowing up your life to break out of that stuckness. That's problematic in so many ways. But it seems like sometimes we think about these options in a binary thing. I either stay with the people I'm with and kind of stay stuck, or I break out and do something different, and that's a sort of personal individual path. But there's really something really beautiful about what you're describing of making these shared decisions within your community or your family or whoever it is around doing big, courageous, disruptive things potentially, right? And I don't know where to quite go with that because it's a very different way of thinking about how to build that life of adventure in a way that doesn't force you to decide between bringing others along with you or not.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying because there really is this different element of interdependency that came up more clear to me. I read a book in 2022 called Disability Visibility. It's a writer called Alice Wong, and it's actually a compendium of experiences from people who have the disability. They wrote the text. They wrote like the articles, chapters, and it was like I I always fought for my independence and autonomy in a way that I thought that I should be able to handle these like things by myself. And I think I was taught like that overall, and I nurtured that in a way through this experience of moving to a different country and reading that, but interacting with other people. I realized how interdependency is the key to making things happen. You don't do things by yourself, and maybe you should be proud of achieving some things by yourself. But the most challenging and I think rewarding thing that you can do is make things with other people and share that realization. Because one thing, even when you do it by yourself, you want to share, right? Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I run, so I'm trying to run faster every day. And whenever it's a good run, I have a chat group with some friends, and I
Hmm.
post it, and like I share the experience, even though I was alone when I did it. So and comparing to previous generations, maybe this realization that you can try to change things is it became a bigger target instead of changing yourself or buying things for you, like buying a bigger house or buying a better car. These things they weren't fulfilling back then, and they aren't still. But maybe we have a broader scope that allows us to understand that, and that making things that change your community for the better, or if you're lucky, like uh, it depends that the size of the community will always depend, right? But maybe changing your country, maybe changing your city, or helping improve something that is a mark that's a part of your legacy. Like buying a new car is not like there's no legacy in
Right.
having a new car or a bigger car, but there's a legacy in changing your community and having a positive impact, right? And that makes you better. Like
Mm.
even if you are unsuccessful, you are better by the end, right? Because you tried and there's good intention. So I think that's maybe a good midpoint review change from
Mm.
generations from past generations.
Yeah, That's a great way of looking at it. I think that is something, and this has come up on this show before, of um, I think that this generation being a little more sort of collectively minded, just in general. I mean, I think a couple of things. One, to your point around the hollowness of a lot of those sort of milestones that you've described. They didn't bring, they didn't bring what people hoped they would in the past, and for so many of us, they're not even available as options now anymore, right? And so that's changed too. Is just, even if we wanted to like crash out and buy a new Porsche, like it's not on the menu, right? And so there's something there, but in some ways I think both maybe as a virtue of how we've grown up, and then also just the context of what's available as options, looking at our communities and how to have that impact, and then also looking inward. And there's that the idea of self-improvement, right? And there's a definitely an unhealthy strain of that's out there, in terms of self care and things that just can get really, really individualistic and really sort of almost narcissistic in some ways. And then there's this really beautiful strain of it that comes around to, personal reflection and cycle breaking, and doing things differently than you're like taking the time to really learn about yourself so that you can do things differently than your own previous generational, yeah, ancestors have, right? And how so many of us are kind of finding that change that we crave in those kinds of activities that are still very individual, but with a broader positive impact in mind in many ways. What do you think? This is a good place to kind of pull back on the conversation. And I always like to take it up a level to talk about it as a generational thing, because it is a moment that so many of us in this age group are going through. What do you think is an opportunity that we have, given that we're going through these reviews, to do things a little bit differently? Or what have you seen that inspires you to think differently than in this moment in time? Because this is a very unique moment in time as well.
I feel like things are moving pretty way faster than before, right? And there's this collective conscience that you can do it.
Mm.
Although maybe it's not that you can do everything,
Mhm.
but there's a bigger scope, right? So like I mentioned, my father, he used to daydream of doing different things, but he was a journalist to the end, and now
Right.
he's retired. But and I was in a different place than him, and I just kept going and moving, like changing careers and changing markets. So the opportunities are there. It's not that everything is good about it. There's always the downside, but there is more flexibility. There is more openness, and even the constraints. I don't know. I'm very positive, even with AI and these things that apparently will retire us all forcefully. Even those things, they seem to me as opportunities. I wouldn't like opportunities, but they are fun, basically, and initially they are fun. And
Yeah.
what you do with them can be fun too.
Hmm.
And you go through ups and downs, as I know I constantly go throughout the day. When I think like I when I was in Brazil, I mentioned to you, I had a podcast. It was about feelings, and what I used to do is like either get a book and reflect on the feeling that on what I felt by reading it, or a passage of the feeling of the character and everything. And my my take on it is like, if you think about how many feelings you have throughout a day,
Mhm.
it's maddening. Like, because you
Hmm.
can feel good at this moment, and 30 seconds later, you're pissed off. And then 15 seconds later, you remember of your daughter and her smiling, and then you're like, so there's this whole scope of experiences that you can have. And I think it was always like that, but now you can act upon them more.
Hmm.
Therefore, the opportunities are there for you to take. It's not easy. You have to work. It depends, right, on the scope of time that you need to invest to do something like building podcast, or I don't know, learning a new program, software, learning a new language,
Mhm.
etc. But like I'm learning French through Duolingo. My father couldn't do that
Yeah.
that easily, right? He had to enroll to like he had to be there to, like, I don't know, twice a week. He didn't have the time, so he didn't do it.
Right.
So now there's a lot of opportunities that you can just grab and try. You can even try like for some time. That's not for me. Let me try something different. So this, like, I think it's wonderful.
I love your perspective on all of these things. It's so uplifting though, and it's so refreshing, and it's such a good reminder in just the beauty of life. I think that you're so right that things might feel less grounded in some ways in life right now. There's a little less stability, but in that comes a certain lightness in the ability to do things, right? And try, as you said, and pick it up, put it down. There is so much opportunity there. Okay, I have two more questions left for you. And so the first one is just kind of rounding out this conversation about going through all of these reviews and all of these experiences that you've described so beautifully around your life. What have you learned about yourself through that? And you've talked a little bit about this, but also as you move into whatever the next review is going to be, because it seems like this will be a constant cycle. What is it about yourself that maybe you're kind of letting go of? And what are you going to bring with you?
By standard, I'm very tough with myself. Like it comes naturally. So whenever I make a mistake, I just get hot, like my body.
Like physically.
And then I realize like, oh man, no. And then I suffer. It depends scope of time. And it's clearly related to how am I going to be capable of solving that problem or not. So I would like to change that. I don't know if I'm capable of doing, maybe that's part of me. But one thing that I do differently is I actively am generous to myself, kind to myself. I know I need to do that because the standard is like just suffering and questioning, constantly questioning myself. Should I have done that? Like, was that right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd be in a different place if I'd done something different. So I'm always trying to, like, this balance of things are as good as I could get, right? So maybe something that I could leave behind is this ruthlessness with myself, like, but I don't know. Maybe it's part of me in a way that it will always be there.
Well, I mean, I think the what you're describing of, it's one of those things. I can't remember what the saying is exactly, but it's that saying, your first reaction is what you've been taught to think, and your second reaction is what you really think, right? And so even if your first reaction is to be a little ruthless with yourself, you can teach yourself to have that second, more generous and kind reaction. And I think that's good advice for all of us to take, to be a little bit more forgiving and generous, because it's so easy to be so heavy. And if you're going to live a life of adventure, you're going to make mistakes, right? And that's okay. Okay, so my last question, and I know it's coming, is we are so often asked what advice we would give our younger selves. But since we are looking into the future in this podcast and thinking about the next half, what advice do you hope that your future self lives by?
I guess having the conscience that you've done enough is, for me, it's very soothing. It makes my life lighter. And I know that this is interesting. Like, we are hiring for my startup now, and I got like tons of resumes as expected, right? We are not famous or like, but people need jobs. And I decided to go through all of them. And it was it was a good and a bad decision, but it was better because through going through them, I felt that feeling that all of us have these stories of perseverance and accomplishment that we tend to forget because we are always fighting for something new and like understanding that we are not good enough or there's someone better than us. So I went through these resumes, and it's funny because they're very similar. Like, I did 30% of that, like, because of me, and I realized that my own resume is like that. But that's the thing. Although maybe we can edit and put something extra on the resume, there's truth there. That is like effort and even belief, like faith that because things were like that, I can do even better in the future. All like a new job is always a new opportunity to make things happen, right? So this conscience that we we move on, because we are like that. Came to me through reading these resumes, and it even helped me understand that, well, yeah, it's been good enough. It can always be better, but it's good enough. My 80-year-old Rodrigo, yeah, you've done enough.
Yeah, there you go. That's so beautiful. What a beautiful reminder to just, and that comes so nicely back to everything we've talked about around enjoying the process and finding joy in the ride and the experience. It's not joyful because it's perfect. It's joyful because you're doing it, right? What a lovely way to end the podcast. Well, Rodrigo, thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm so grateful for you to come on today and have this conversation with me. So thank you so much.
This journey is awesome. I'm listening to all of them.
I appreciate that. I hope all of you are listening as well and smashing that subscribe button. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. That's our show. Thank you, Rodrigo, for being such a great guest. There are so many things about this show that I'm going to take with me and think about in the future. And the next time I order something online, I will download the app and try to find a little more joy in watching it navigate its way to my front door. Thank you again to our sponsor, Habit Coffee Club. Visit www.habitcoffeeclub.com and use promo code midpoint at checkout for 20% off your next purchase. That's it for our show today. We'll see you guys next week.